is an exciting one. We're going to do part 2 of our must draft value wide receivers going in those mid to late rounds.
Right here.
Welcome in, Whisper Nation, to episode 103 of the Fantasy Whispers. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for that beautiful intro. As always, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit subscribe, hit the like button, drop us a comment.
Good morning.
Johnny.
Good morning to you two. This is I am so excited not only for this show, but I did happen to check my email this morning before the show, and I saw
did a lot of things before the show.
I did do a lot of things before the show, and I noticed that my swag, Chelsea was talking about swag in the intro, my swag will be here on Friday. I ordered like 10 different shirts, so I cannot wait for that. I will have one of our TFW swag shirts on the next show.
Yeah, we've done like a little retro logo, a little paying homage to some pro wrestling. You guys got to check that out. It's a lot of fun.
I wasn't talking about that one. I was talking about my CD Lamb one. Let's get that straight, okay?
Well, the CD Lamb shirt is also on the website, as Chelsea said. But it's time to give you those wide receiver values going in the middle to late rounds. Part 2.
Once it hits your lips, it's so good.
This tastes so good.
A la Frank the Tank, we're going to go through some of these guys here, give you a whole beer bong full of wide receiver value here. And we're going to start with another Pittsburgh Steeler. We talked about Ben Roethlisberger, the importance of him being back, having that elbow, completely rehabilitated, having his beard trimmed down, throwing to his receivers in the offseason. And that receiver he was throwing to on recent footage was Juju Smith-Schuster, Johnny.
Oh, I thought you were talking about me. I got nervous there for a second. I was like, whoa, you taking pictures of me without me knowing, Travis? Wow, unbelievable. Yeah, man, Juju Smith-Schuster. Well, welcome back to fantasy football, my friend. And this is just, it's mind-blowing to me, Travis. I'm glad that this is the first guy that we're talking about, because every mock draft, it seems like, or the majority of them, if you don't grab them, I grab them. But Juju Smith-Schuster, now I totally get it. I totally understand. Juju Smith-Schuster came in hot. His rookie year, this guy was getting 28% target market share with Antonio Brown there and Big Ben. All right, so that was wide receiver 1 numbers with another alpha wide receiver 1 there. Juju Smith-Schuster last year, though, comes in, everyone drafting him high. We were super high on him. Apologize to Whisper Nation for that. But Big Ben does get hurt, and as a result, Juju Smith-Schuster only finishes with 42 receptions for 552 yards and 3 touchdowns on 71 targets. Now, here's the big thing. I'm a firm believer in it was because of Big Ben was the reason why Juju Smith-Schuster fell down. He was first year as being the number 1 alpha dog.
He also had injuries last year, too.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. He also had injuries as well. And, everyone is out there saying, the big thing, they're saying, well, if it had to be so related to Big Ben, and you're saying to me, Johnny, that Big Ben was the reason why Juju Smith-Schuster didn't do well last year, how come Deontay Johnson and how come James Washington were both able to do so well with Duck Hodges and the other trash
Mason
cans
Rudolph.
that they brought in on Sunday? No,
Mason Rudolph is a trash can.
Yeah. So how are those guys able to do well, Johnny? If they didn't have Big Ben Roethlisberger, and to this I will equate that to saying we see this often with backup QBs and then these younger wide receivers, because they spend more time on the practice field together. Juju is practicing with Big Ben with the first teams. Deontay Johnson and James Washington are practicing with Hodges, are practicing with these backup quarterbacks. So it's just natural that when they come in, they already have this rapport. And I'm not saying that Juju wasn't getting targets. He was getting plenty, 71 targets, but
I'll tell you right now, like there's a combination, and I love that you brought up that point of the second team guys working with the second team quarterback. The other portion here, and part of what these anti-Juju Smith-Schuster pundits were saying last year was, well, now without Antonio Brown, he'll have to face the number one corner every week. Now he'll have to face all. And I think there is a portion of that is true. The difference here is when Duck Hodges is throwing you the football, he's not really able to put it wherever he wants it. Where Ben Roethlisberger can master back shoulder throws, can know the nuances of his wide receiver because he's seen so many years of doing this, and can kind of put the ball where he wants to. He's got the caliber to do so. And I think that's a big point here. And I think also Ben Roethlisberger's ability to extend drives, not only with his escapability, but he knows when to check it down and get the drive still going. These younger quarterbacks were not able to sustain drives. I mean, I don't think people realized, unless they had a part of Juju Smith-Schuster or James Conner, like we were talking about, how bad this offense was without Ben Roethlisberger. And the other point here is Pittsburgh's continuity, which means they have Randy Fichtner as still the offensive coordinator here. He was there with Antonio Brown and with Ben Roethlisberger and Juju. He knows what Ben's play style is. He knows how to cater this offense to Ben. And I think Juju is really, people were burned last year by him. And they're baking that into his ADP right now. If you trust in Ben Roethlisberger to stay healthy, you should be trusting big time in Juju Smith-Schuster. I know at a 6th-round draft price, Johnny, I'm going to be taking a lot of shares of Juju if that's where he stays around.
Mason Rudolph last year, he only had 5 money throws. That was 30. That was dead last for starting quarterbacks. 32. So yeah, I'm excited for Juju.
Well, another guy you're really excited about is the guy we're going to talk about next. I feel like this is our segue every time. Like, you are most excited. Each time we go to a name, you're more excited.
Hey.
So let's talk about DJ Moore of the...
Wait, who? Who?
DJ Moore.
Oh, yeah. That's right, baby.
I can't get through these fast enough without you using them. All right, so DJ Moore is a guy Johnny has shares of in Dynasty, has been pumping all season long, probably drafts him in every single mock draft we do for the site.
Yeah.
Johnny, tell Whisper Nation why DJ Moore is, 1, being disrespected, and 2, has the ceiling that you believe he has.
So I was fully on DJ Moore his rookie year. I loved him. I thought he had great prospects. Big Travy and I discussed him. We went back and forth. Travy was on him as well.
Yeah, I believe you were trying to tell me Curtis Samuel was the better
last year. I did. Yeah, I did. I did. But hey, just like all things, you evaluate and you reevaluate. New information comes out, and then you can take that and you decide what you're going to do with it. And what I have seen from DJ Moore is this. Last year, he breaks out and finishes with Josh Allen as the wide receiver 18 last year. This year, he's getting a new scheme, a new offensive coordinator, which, could be worrisome for some players. However, Teddy Bridgewater is coming in as the quarterback, and I understand a lot of people in the fantasy community aren't respecting Teddy Bridgewater and what he does for an offense. They don't think he can do it. They don't think he has what it takes in order to elevate this offense. But let me remind you this, Whisper Nation. This offensive coordinator and this head coach that they brought in to Carolina was his head coach in college. He knows this system. And what did we see from Teddy Bridgewater when he did come in for Drew Brees? He did with the first few weeks. He didn't have anything significant. Didn't throw over 200 yards. Wasn't exciting. However, when Sean McVay finally took the wheels off of, or the training wheels off of the bike and just said, Teddy, you know what? We believe in you, brother. Go out there. All of a sudden, we started seeing these 300-plus passing games from Teddy Bridgewater, who is super, super accurate.
Well, he only had one of those games. He only had one game over 300 yards.
A 298 was the other one. Okay. Sorry, I'm rounding. Yeah, sorry, I'm rounding a few yards here. But I will say that if you look at you can say, okay, Teddy Bridgewater is still, I'm not convinced he's a great quarterback. Look what he did for Michael Thomas. From weeks 2 to 7. Wide receiver 12, wide receiver 22, wide receiver 11, 2, 15, 5. 4 out of the 6 weeks, Michael Thomas was a wide receiver 1. And you're going to say, well, Michael Thomas is the greatest wide receiver in the entire NFL. A lot of people would argue with that, by the way. I don't disagree with it. But I'm saying DJ Moore has just as much talent as Michael Thomas. And therefore, DJ Moore has top 5 upside this year. And I believe that's where he's going to get. He's going to be top 5.
That is a bold statement.
It is a bold statement, Cotman.
I don't believe he'll end up top 5. I think the reason that Michael Thomas ends up top 5 every year after year, is because of 2 things: Sean McVay and Drew Brees. I think that it's a combination of both. Now,
I just told you, he had Teddy Bridgewater for half the season.
You have a 5-game, 6-game sample size.
7-game sample size. 6-game sample size. That's a
6-game sample size. That's awesome. Like, I just don't think you can build a whole career of a top 5 guy based on 6 games in a system that's dominated by a run of the mill, or like not a run of the mill, but like a transcendent offensive play caller in Sean McVay. So we have to go with a rookie head coach in the NFL, not a rookie head coach ever. Like a rookie head coach in the NFL. Okay, so now we've got to rely on that for him to call in plays.
Do we hold back Arizona last year with Kiff? Oh my goodness!
Was any of Arizona's wide receivers last year a top 5 wide receiver?
No, but were any of them as good as DJ Moore? No.
Okay. That's your personal opinion. I don't hold DJ Moore in that much regard. Like, even Player Profiler has him compared to Pierre Garçon. So he's a possession guy. He's a possession wide receiver. I understand you like him a lot. I think that you might be reaching for situations to match your narrative. But that all being said, I loved what you laid out as far as what Teddy could do for a number 1 wide receiver. There is no doubt that DJ Moore is the number 1 wide receiver in my mind for Carolina. And I do think that a 7th round draft price is low for a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. And so I think, yes, he's a value here. I agree with you that. Top 5 is a little ideas of grandeur here, I would say, for you there, Johnny.
Whisper Nation, let us know in the comments if you think that DJ Moore can be top 5. Please tell Big Travy that he is just...
Take that bet. I will take that bet right now that he will not be.
Oh, let's do it. That's a deal. That's a deal.
All right. Well, moving on to the...
I think you're wrong, Lloyd. How much you want to bet?
Yeah. How much you want to bet, Lloyd?
I mean, we'll have to figure that out. But, these wide receivers in Arizona that Johnny hates so much, he just talked about how none of them were very good last year, is Christian Kirk. So we're going to talk about Christian Kirk, another 7th round ADP. And so, Johnny, talk to me about Christian Kirk. What are your thoughts here? He's obviously kind of an odd man out if you think about what's going on over in Arizona and how DeAndre Hopkins has come to town. You talk about Kenyon Drake getting a lot of receptions out of the backfield. So where does Christian Kirk stack up? My main question for Christian Kirk, Johnny, actually is, where do you see his target market share landing?
Okay. So first of all, the diss on me, you're trying to diss me by saying he didn't even play all the games last year. That's why I'm saying that Christian Kirk wasn't that good.
He played 13 of them.
And we needed him in 16. So don't give me that. All right, sir. And he didn't show up week 16 at all, which was a little frustrating. But he showed flashes. I mean, week 10 against Tampa Bay, 10 targets, 6 receptions and 3 touchdowns, 138 yards. 85 receiving yards on 8 receptions, week 14. This guy has the upside. He has a really, really, really nice upside that a lot of these other wide receivers, Will Fuller's going in this area, but there's not a lot of wide receivers that truly have the upside of Christian Kirk. We are giving you those values right now. That's why it sounds like, well, Johnny, there's a lot of them out down here based on what you're telling me. But these, again, are just a handful that we picked out of the groupings that are going. But let me just tell you this, Travis. If this doesn't excite you as a listener or as a fantasy fan, I'm not sure I can get much more exciting for Christian Kirk. Last year had super, super high potential, was injured, and so that value, I think, is discrediting him for his true upside. I think he's going to be a locked and loaded wide receiver 2 this year based on this offense, based on Cliff Kingsbury, based on the fact that they brought in DeAndre Hopkins, Travis, which we see what the DeAndre Hopkins effect is. Will Fuller is just like, I mean, Christian Kirk is much shorter than Will Fuller, but you got to think of the same concept, right? Because the teams were double teaming or focusing their attention on Hopkins, it allowed Will Fuller to get behind defenses, which is exactly what Christian Kirk's going to do. For me, and he's tied.
When you,
I
was just going to say, when you dive into the numbers here, I think it's actually really encouraging. You talked about only 13 games played. That's still a considerable amount if you're looking at a fantasy season. That's exactly the length of your fantasy regular season. But I think the snap share percentage was really high, 98.5% of the snap share, including 32.5 in the slot. 98% of the snap share was good for the second best amongst wide receivers last year. He had 19 deep targets. I thought that was pretty nice. And then we talked about target share at the top of this segment, Johnny. His target share was 24.5%. That was good for 16th best in the NFL. If he's 16th best, there's 32 teams. That means he's better than half, or around better than half, the number one wide receivers in the league that are out there. So that target share is really nice to see for a guy that's may dip in target share because of DeAndre Hopkins. I think that's a possibility, but the quality of the targets that he will now see tends to make you think that it's going to be a lot more profitable for a guy like Christian Kirk.
I mean, quality of targets out of the 3 that we just mentioned, Juju, DJ Moore, and Christian Kirk, you would say that Kyler Murray is the best quarterback throwing the ball to any of those wide receivers out of the 3 that we talked about.
Well,
so
you
far.
might say that Teddy Bridgewater is better, but I mean, that's just because you love Teddy Bridgewater. So, I will say that the upside is definitely better for all of them. I wouldn't discredit Ben so much to say that he's not able to sling the ball.
Well, I'm not saying that, but you wouldn't take Big Ben over Kyler.
No,
Murray.
not off the elbow injury or anything like that.
That's all I'm saying.
Sure. Okay, so moving on to our next guy, and this one's a tasty one. This one's got the big name.
Might be a shocker to you. Might be a shocker that we're talking to you about him here.
Odell Beckham Jr. is sitting right now, not just in the 7th round, Johnny, but an ADP of 712, which means he's nearly in the 8th round, Johnny, for a guy that was being taken at the 2nd round, maybe even at the second turn in some instances last year because of his placement into the Cleveland offense. The offense was really hyped. Baker Mayfield was coming off a season last year or the year before last where he threw the most touchdowns for a rookie quarterback. So my question to you, Johnny, is why are we trying to convince Whisper Nation that OBJ is worth it at the 7th? Is it just based on draft value, or do you think Beckham gets back to his elite status?
Yeah, so you talked about, I mean, is it recency bias? Is that why he's going so late in drafts? Could be, or could it actually be a reason and a thing that OBJ should be going here? Is that his true value? Now, if you mock draft with us or you're in any of those mock drafts or that you've seen, OBJ is going much higher in those than the 7th round. Oftentimes, people will say, where would you take him? End of 3rd, beginning of 4th is where I'm starting to consider him, honestly, is where you should start considering. And that's probably where his value is going to go. You look at last year, he, didn't have as big of a year as everyone thought. Everyone was expecting because of Baker Mayfield. They thought he was going to take a step forward. They didn't. That offense didn't take a step forward. And as a result, people are overreacting, in my eyes, in a complete opposite direction. I get the fact that he's not really been, as effective as we've always thought, right? Like, he's not really ever outperformed where we've drafted him ever in fantasy football, but this might be the first year to do it because he's coming off of an injury last year. We know that was true. He had a hernia issue. It could explain one of the reasons he had one of the most dropped passes of any wide receiver, which is a little bit surprising because it is OBJ. But I think it was a struggle between Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham and getting on the same page. And so, yeah, OBJ had 11 drops. He was number one at the position for drops, which is never a good sign. But I think that will get corrected. It's OBJ. We know how good his hands are. I just think that they were just trying to do too much. They were in their head. And another reason, Travis, and I think that you might get into this, but it's the head coach. The head coach is another reason why I think his stock is falling a little bit.
I think we talked about this when we were talking about Jarvis Landry versus OBJ a couple shows ago. But I think what I really want to hit on here is don't forget about the talent here. Okay. Like we're talking about a guy, Austin, in one of our group chats, Austin shared this highest graded rookie wide receivers of the decade from PFF. Number one by nearly 5 rating percentage points was Odell Beckham Jr. at 91.2.
Yeah.
Okay. The next best was Terry McLaurin at 86.5. So we're talking about
my boy, Scary Terry.
Of course you love that. But we're talking about a situation here that OBJ is mega talented. And none of that really, if you look at what was going on as far as opportunity, that doesn't scare you away either. This guy had a 97.3 snap share, good for 6th best in the NFL. Deep targets of 31, second best in the NFL.
Yeah.
Was a top 15 in target share at 25.6. It's all there. And when we talk about positive regression, it means, when will this actually balance out and go to the positive side of things? Well, when the numbers are like this, Johnny, and he's getting opportunity and he's got talent, he's got all that talent still. He was just dealing with a little bit of a hernia injury. They had offensive line issues. They had play calling issues.
Yeah.
The guy, God, I can't even remember his name now. Freddie Kitchens. Freddie Kitchens had issues calling plays last year. You have all of these things wrapped into one, disgusting pie that for OBJ last year. And I think at the back of the 7th, if there's a guy here that really has a shot at top 5, it's OBJ.
Yeah.
It's not DJ Moore.
Right.
It's OBJ here. And that's because the talent, the opportunity are all there. We're just waiting for it to click in Cleveland. And I understand you don't want to trust Cleveland, but I trust what I've seen out of Baker Mayfield. And what I love about Cleveland this offseason, I don't hear anything. I hear no noise right now.
They're going to work there.
And that's what Baker has said. It's time to go to work. We talked all last year about being good. It's time to be good. And I think that is what OBJ is. He's good. You draft him the 7th, 6th. I mean, hell, even the 5th, man. I'm okay with that.
That's what I'm saying. It's going to get to a point where he will get up to the 4th round, beginning of the 4th round. And I still think you should have confidence taking him there. I mean, you look at this offense and what they're going to run, Travis. They're going to have one-on-one matchups. It's going to be juice on one side. They're going to run 12 personnel. So they'll run 2 tight ends and 2 wide receivers. Why? Because both Juju and OBJ are extremely good in one-on-one situations. They'll have to stack. Teams will have to be forced to put an extra linebacker on the field because of the 2 tight ends. And this could be one of the most efficient offenses in the entire league. And yeah, I want a piece of it this year.
So we're talking about another guy next who may not have the excitement of these other guys, but he's a guy that you should be on your radar. That's Darius Slayton going in the 9th round, 908, Johnny. Talk about Darius Slayton. His chemistry was really there with Danny Dimes last year. And I think that's what makes him so exciting, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, deep targets, 23 was good for 19th in the league, but he also didn't come in and play right away. He only played 14 games last season, and that chemistry is still building with Danny Dimes. But, I like the offensive coordinator, I do like that they brought in, it sounds kind of, Jason Garrett. I understand people are probably chuckling because you're like, oh, you like Jason Garrett. I'm not a huge fan of Jason Garrett, but I do like what he does for offenses in regards to fantasy football. And I think that if you're looking, it's really interesting because a lot of these wide receivers for the Giants are later on in the drafts. I Sterling Shepard, I think, is a tremendous value. And I honestly thought you were going to go with Slayton as maybe your late round guy that you can get. But
big fan of Slayton. I think the potential's there. He's got juice. He's definitely a guy that Danny Dimes looks to.
8 touchdowns.
His catch radius is off the charts, so he's very forgiving for a younger quarterback, which is nice. He's got the 4.39 40 speed, so he's in the 95th percentile there. He is a guy that could, like, if you talk about one of these late round guys that has a path to being the number one on their team, it's hard to make a case against Darius Slayton. I know Sterling Shepard exists, but that dude's got a bunch of injury problems. You talk about Evan Ingram, you talk about Golden Tate. Sure, Golden Tate is a possession receiver. He's going to soak up targets. Darius Slayton's your pop guy, the guy that really can make the big plays for you.
Yeah.
And if he starts to be the guy that Danny goes to, we know Danny Dimes is not afraid to let that thing rip and go to a guy. And Slayton has some real pop for a 9th round player.
Yeah. I mean, and not even that, but you just look at some of the games that he had last year, Travis. He finished as a wide receiver 2 in week 10, wide receiver 13 in week 8, wide receiver 16 in week 5. So it wasn't super consistent, and that's what you'll generally find with a lot of these later round guys. They're not super consistent, but they have the upside to get you top 5 on certain weeks. And if you're getting that, like you said, in the 9th, 10th round, sign me up.
Speaking of consistent, though, is our next guy, and that's Emmanuel Sanders, who's been drafted in the who's being drafted.
It's our last guy, round. Travis. Not only that, it is our last guy of
Save
this
the best
list
for last. But no, Emmanuel Sanders is very intriguing. He's being drafted in the 9-11 spot here. And he's gone to the New Orleans Saints here as the number 2 behind Michael Thomas. And so we've seen New Orleans make this transition over the last few years. Who is going to be that number 2 weapon for them? It can't just always be Alvin Kamara. We saw Jared Cook do some good things last year. But now Emmanuel Sanders comes to town. And so, Johnny, I got to like this matchup or this marriage between the two, Emmanuel Sanders and Drew Brees.
Certainly on paper, it's very, very interesting. New Orleans needs a wide receiver. Number 2, they only have Michael Thomas, and they've just been feeding him. And they've kind of been searching for this wide receiver, too, for a while. They were hoping that they could have drafted one, but it never really worked out. And so they bring in a guy, a seasoned vet, Sanders, who we've seen time and time again transfer to different teams and still be fantasy relevant, which surprised me. Even gets traded mid-season and still is able to help your fantasy roster, which rarely ever happens. So for me, the concern is not so much like, am I worried about Emmanuel Sanders and how he's going to fit into this offense? I think that he is going to come in. He had total last year, he had 96 targets throughout the entire season. I don't see a problem with that, being similar in targets or even a little bit more, because of the fact that people are going to be double teaming Michael Thomas. He'll be one-on-one. He can still get free. And, he's not really showing a lot of effects from that Achilles injury. So, I mean, you like the offense, you like the player, and going super late in drafts, why not take the dart throw on him?
Yeah, but between changing teams last year, you had 8 red zone receptions. That was good for 18th in the NFL. You think that Sean Payton's not going to understand that Emmanuel Sanders is a good red zone option? He can sneak behind and bury himself in cushions. I think that's a big part of this. Obviously, the scheme is a huge part, but more weapons. And, Emmanuel Sanders can be used all over the place. He's got great speed. He can do the bubble screens. He can do end arounds. He can be very creative. And he being Sean Payton can be very creative with what he does with Emmanuel Sanders. And I think that, look, we're talking about guys in the late round. Emmanuel Sanders could end up being a locked-in wide receiver too, and you got him in the 9th round. It's like that's the upside that's there, and I think it's worth it when you're taking stabs that late.
Oh, he's an absolute flex play for sure, each and every single week.
All right, well, that wraps up our wide receiver values for part 2. So we knew there were a lot of names here. We wanted to get you our absolute values. If you did miss part 1, go back and listen to it because we've got some other steals that are just in the rounds ahead of these guys. But we're really excited about these players. In Whisper Nation, we want you to let us know if you are excited about any other late round guys or the guys that we mentioned. hit us up in our DMs on all social media platforms. And if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and leave us a comment and let us know who you think. For Johnny Game Time Hicks, Chelsea Lee Byers, I'm Big Travy. We are the Fantasy Whisperers, and we are out. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.